Gonna be quiet on the front end.
Well, it looks like we've got quite a few people joining, so welcome, welcome. If you're here for Negotiate Like a Pro, we've opened it up a few minutes early. You're in the right place. Just sit tight. We're going to be starting promptly at the top of the hour.
And if you like to say where you're from, just click on the Q&A and pop in and tell us who you are and where you're coming from.
That would be awesome. Yeah, don't use the chat, use the Q&A button. Beacon, hi, Stephen, welcome. And I'd love to hear you guys too, if you want to share your business, what your business is, that would be fantastic. Hi, Jen, New York City, Jennifer, Port Chester, welcome, welcome to the webinar today. You guys are all in the right place. Just put your name, where you're from, and your business in the Q&A, not the chat. We're using the Q&A today, and we're going to be starting here right at the top of the hour.
Hi, Patricia, calling in from Westchester. Hello, Cheyenne.
Olive Bridge, that's pretty cool.
Jennifer, Spot
You're not too
Solutions
far from me.
Incorporated.
Yeah. Very nice. Welcome, everybody.
And Stephen is a filmmaker and photographer.
Oh, very cool.
Hi, Al. Virtual tour photographers. We have 2 photographers.
Cool.
Hello, Arlene. And Jen. Ronnie. Hi, Tamara, calling in from Westchester. GLB Express Bus Corporation. And Georgina is a designer.
Oh, I love Ronnie. Your business is providing subscribers a virtual reality parachute flight simulation for all those of us who want to do that, but are maybe a little too afraid. That sounds like a perfect solution. I love it.
And Jen is a benefits administrator.
Very nice.
For small businesses. Great.
All right, awesome. Jewelry designer, Georgiana, welcome, welcome. I like Valerie, copywriter and serial entrepreneur. I use that to describe myself as well. I think I've had a business since I was 8 years old in some form or another. I love that, serial entrepreneur.
Hi, Eileen. What's your business, Eileen?
Oh, there we go. Admin on call. Very nice. Awesome. Virtual administrative solutions.
Somebody a lot of people can use.
Oh, yeah. Most definitely. All right, you guys who are new and just joining us, you're in the right place for Negotiate Like a Pro. We're going to start promptly at the top of the hour. We're just letting everybody get in, get settled, and get signed up. If you just joined the call, you can use the Q&A to pop in your name, where you're from, and your business.
Hello, Rob. Rob's in the media and take commissions for making
videos.
Okay.
That's so great. These days, video is taking over the world, so that's fantastic. Much needed service. All right,
Rose, yes, Jen, there will be a recorded link, and you'll be able to see this later too.
Absolutely.
But Rose, it looks like with questions. Hello, Connor. Elite Construction. Shenandoah, welcome. Noel, welcome. Monique from Vocational Rehab Services.
All right, Rose, so we're at the top of the hour. You want to go ahead and get us kicked off?
All right, let's get started here. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining Negotiate Like a Pro. I'm Rose Rubin. I'm the chapter chair for Ulster SCORE. And this webinar is being sponsored by the Hudson Valley chapters of SCORE, as well as the Greater New York chapters. So our presenter today is Jennifer Dawn. She's the owner of Jennifer Dawn Coaching. She is a serial entrepreneur, as she said earlier. She's grown 2 multi-million-dollar businesses, loves her work on the third one. She's also a successful speaker and author. Jennifer serves high entrepreneurs, and she helps them clarify their business vision, refine their goals, and execute a strategy to achieve them. So good stuff.
Ready for the next one?
Yep.
There we go.
Okay, so our this is just to introduce you to SCORE in case you don't know. Our goal is to foster vibrant small businesses through free mentoring and education. We also serve small businesses. We're supported by the Small Business Administration. We offer free confidential business mentoring. And we have access now to local and national mentors with a wide variety of expertise and experience, so you can get whatever experience you need. We also do workshops and webinars, as you can see. And SCORE.org has an extensive educational resources platform. We're going to tell you phone numbers and emails on this next slide, how to reach your local chapter. But do know that this is being recorded. You'll receive slides and a link to the recording within 2 days. So you'll see the contact information there. Okay, so how this is going to work, this webinar, everyone will be muted during the presentation, as you are now. And as we go along, make sure you put your questions in the Q&A. That way Jennifer will be able to see them. She'll glance over at these questions as she goes through her presentation and answer as many as she possibly can by the end of the session. Next. To get the most out of today, just to have an open mindset, kind of set aside everything that you're thinking right now and be open to whatever Jennifer has to offer and just try it on. Take some notes and make a commitment to actually do something with the notes and do something with the information to move your business forward. So now I'm just going to turn it over to Jennifer.
Oh, awesome. Fantastic. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much for being here with us today. As Rose mentioned, the Q&A is open. You can type live questions in there. Several of you have asked for auto captions to be turned on. Those should be now turned on. You will be getting a recording within 2 days of the presentation. So if there's anything you missed or can't take a note on, or if you're driving, don't worry, a recording absolutely will be provided of the presentation. On the Q&A, you guys definitely put your notes, your comments, whatever in there. I will do my very best as we go along. There's a lot of you and there's one of me. So if I don't get to everything, I'm sorry, but I will do my very best to get to as many of your questions as I can during the presentation. But as Rose mentioned, first of all, come to the training today with an open mindset. This is the way that you receive information. Even if you've heard something before, it's not a bad thing. When we hear things and we're like, oh, right, I knew that, but it's so great to have those reminders. So if you hear something you've heard before, not a problem, just receive that in. If you hear new information that you've never heard before, again, we need an open mindset to be able to receive that information. Of course, take some notes, you'll get the recording, but even bigger is as we go through the presentation today, make a commitment to change something. When you look at what you're doing, how you're negotiating, how you're communicating, I have no doubt there's going to be at least one, if not many, takeaways that you're going to have from today's presentation, but they do no good whatsoever if you don't make that commitment to change and make that commitment to actually do something with the information and bring it into your negotiations, bring it into your communication. So for those of you, some of you may know me. For those of you who do not, my name is Jennifer Dawn. I'm the founder of Jennifer Dawn Coaching and Consulting. I'm also the founder of Goal Achievers, which is our virtual life coaching platform, as well as the Best Planner Ever. We help business owners to get out into the world and to serve through their businesses to the very, very best of their abilities. But we coach on doing that service without sacrifice, meaning don't give up the things in your life that matter the most. And that's really what my practice is built on. I'm married, I'm a mother of 3, have a horse, love to take motorcycle trips. I am a serial entrepreneur, as Rose mentioned, just like many of you. And when it comes to negotiation, the truth is that I don't like any kind of conflict. Most people don't. And the people who do like conflict, you probably don't want to be around them. But most of us, we don't really like conflict, but it is often necessary when we have to negotiate in our businesses and in our lives. And so, like you, I had to learn the subtle art of negotiation and how to do it and to do it well. And if I can learn it, I know that you can as well. Now, the number one key to negotiation, let's talk about that. Do you have to be more aggressive? Do you have to be a bully? Do you have to be controlling? Do you have to be demanding? Or do you have to maybe be seen as like, hey, that person is a total jerk? No, you don't need to do any of those things. And sometimes when we think about negotiation, and certainly with all the reality shows and stuff that we see all the time, we think, oh my gosh, in order to negotiate well, I've got to be a bully, I've got to be pushy, I've got to be aggressive. And if that's not your natural personality type, it's going to make negotiations really, really difficult. But the good news is you don't have to do any of those things to be really, really good at negotiation. The number one key to negotiate like a pro is empathetic listening. For some of you, that may be a little surprise, and for some of you, maybe not so much. But empathetic listening is absolutely the number one key to successful negotiations. And here's why. We don't listen. We are naturally, this is human beings, it's not any one person in particular, but human beings are naturally self-centered. And so when another person is talking, and if you really pay attention, again, no judgment, but if you pay attention, when another person is talking, what we're usually doing is we're having a conversation up in our own heads about our opinion on the subject. In fact, you might even notice that as I've started talking, maybe you're starting to have some internal dialogue up in your head on your opinion around what it is that I'm actually talking about. The other thing, if I asked you guys to, hey, ask a question, or what's your biggest takeaway? If I ask you something along those lines, instead of listening to what I'm saying, you're most likely thinking about, what am I going to say? Think about it if you've been in a negotiation or you've been in a meeting, that inner dialogue that's going on is actually really, really hurting your empathetic listening skills. When you're not focused on the person who is speaking, when you're in a negotiation, what happens is that we don't really hear them. We don't, because we got this inner dialogue going on up in our head. And as a result, because we don't really hear them, we don't build the trust that's absolutely necessary for successful negotiations, because in the end, it is all about the trust. Trust is necessary for all relationships, your business relationships, your personal relationships. And we are going to build that trust based on what we deem is necessary to have that successful relationship. Think about this for a second. So in your business, if you've ever had somebody refer business to you, usually referrals are going to be the easiest sale that you're ever going to close. Why? Because there's already a level of trust. That person who's coming in, who's been referred, has been told how great and wonderful you are. And so, of course, they're coming into the relationship already trusting you because of what they've been told about you. And because you already have that level of trust, so long as you don't violate it, you don't do anything to ruin it, usually a sale for a referral is just going to be so much easier. And that's because it goes to the trust. It's no different when we are negotiating things. And when you think about it, we negotiate so many things. We are negotiating on sales if we're bringing new clients into our businesses. We're negotiating with our teams, right? Our employees, our contractors, their roles, their responsibilities, what they're going to do, what they're not going to do. We're negotiating with our current clients. We're negotiating with our peers, our friends, and often we're even negotiating with our loved ones. If you're in any kind of a relationship and any kind of an intimate relationship with your partner, you know that negotiation is happening. Sometimes it might not feel that way. It might feel like, you know, fighting or adversity or all other kinds of things, but that's truly what's happening, is that we are negotiating. So the number one key to negotiate like a pro is to learn to listen like a pro. Do we need to learn how to do this? Yes, absolutely, because nobody really taught us how to listen. And most of us have never been taught properly, or we've not done training or sessions on really how to build and develop our empathetic listening skills. But when you start to build this and practice this, it's going to help build your trust in all your relationships, personal and business, and it's going to help elevate those to a whole new level. You absolutely can change this, and I really encourage you to really take this seriously because it makes so much difference. When you don't commit to really learning how to listen, you're going to limit the level of power and influence that you have in all of your relationships. All of your relationships. This is a big deal. And think about it right now. Like, if you're talking with somebody, you can always tell if they're not listening to you. Even if they're on Zoom and right in front of you, you can tell they're listening to me, they're not listening to me. If you're on a phone call, you can tell they're listening, they're not listening. And just think about how that changes how you interact in that conversation, in that relationship. And so when they can tell that you're not, they're having those same thoughts and feelings. And again, we're not then building trust in that relationship, which is so necessary to negotiate. So the very, very first step here is to realize just how little you're listening. And we're all going to be on different ends of the spectrum here, but we want to bring some awareness into how little am I listening, and then make the commitment to change it. Most people think that they are better listeners than they really are. And most likely what's happening is you're missing a significant amount of what that other person is saying and what they're trying to tell you. The average listening efficiency, I was shocked when I saw this stat, is 25%. That's it. 25% is the average listening efficiency. That means that we are missing 75% of what's being said. And if that's the case, no wonder negotiations can be so very difficult. Because what you're really missing when you're not listening at a high level is that opportunity to build trust. When you have trust, that's going to bring influence and power. And when we talk about negotiations, influence and power are definitely two tools that you want to have on your side. But when people know that you're really and truly, you're tuned in, you're paying attention, you're listening to them, they want to be part of your life. They want to stick around. They want to do business with you. Take a second and think about this. If you have somebody in your life right now that when you speak, they actually listen to you, they really hear you, don't you want that person around? Don't you want to do whatever you can do for that person if they need something and they come to you? Of course, because you've got that trust there. And with trust comes that power and that influence. Not to be wielded in a bad way, just so we're super, super clear. Now, some of the other benefits when you really enhance your listening skills is that you're going to pick up information in the conversation that you can then act upon. When you're missing 75% of what's said and then you're responding, you're just going to be missing the mark, especially in a negotiation. But if you're really listening, you can then pick up and act upon that information at the appropriate time, and it's going to make a huge difference in your negotiations. This is going to, again, increase your influence, but also the power that you have of persuasion, helping to negotiate whatever it is, because it really and truly is the power of persuasion. Right now in this presentation, I am trying to persuade you to improve your listening skills so that from there you can improve your negotiation skills. All right, but how? For those of you who have trained with me before, you know I'm all about that, but how do we actually take it and apply this? We can talk about general concepts, but they really don't matter if we don't take them and actually start to apply them in our negotiations. Okay, so let's dive into the how behind becoming a better listener so that you can negotiate like a pro. So let's start with, what are some of the things that actually keep us from listening? Background noise, personal discomfort. If you're in an uncomfortable chair, or maybe you're driving, you're distracted by other things. As a business coach, I make it a firm rule that I never do a coaching call if I'm trying to drive. If I can't be in my office distraction-free to give my client my full attention, I reschedule the call, because there just isn't a way to really do that other person justice, especially if they're paying for that call, if I'm trying to drive, if I'm being distracted, if I'm trying to do other things. Sometimes there are things happening in our personal lives. We're going through something very challenging. Maybe we're faced with a problem in our relationship. We're going through a divorce. We're having a problem with our child. We just received a health diagnosis. We've injured ourselves. Any of those kinds of things, we will bring that into the conversation. And again, it's going to be a major distraction, and it's going to keep us from listening. Do you fully understand the topic? Or maybe you're a little bit lost, and so you're afraid to ask clarifying questions. You're concerned about, like, what are they going to think of me if I ask a clarifying question? And again, that's going to keep you from listening, because you're having that conversation up in your head around, like, oh my God, I'm not sure what's happening, and I'm afraid to ask a question, and da 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 da. And that's how we're missing so much of the information. Judgments. Think about this for a second. We can be pretty judgy, and somebody is saying something and we're busy judging their hair or what they're wearing, or how they talk, if they talk too fast or they talk too slow, and we're busy making all of these judgments. And again, it's killing our listening skills. Perhaps you're going into the conversation with your own agenda, and you're so focused on trying to get your own agenda forward that that's going to detract you from listening to what's being said in the conversation. If you build those listening skills, that's what's actually going to help you move your agenda, not the fact that you're pushing and pushing that agenda. We're thinking about what to say next, or we're thinking about our own opinions on what is being said. And as we go through today's training, it's an excellent opportunity to really pay attention. Are you judging? Are you thinking about your own opinions? Are you thinking about maybe what to say next? Is there things going on in your personal life that are distracting you from listening? And again, no judgment on this, but we have to bring awareness in, because if we become aware that we're doing something, then we can take steps to actually change it or do something about it. Just kind of pay attention as we go through the training. Do you see some of these things happening as well? 3 keys that I want to share with you guys today on better listening: focus, discovery, and heart. Focus, key number 1. Set your focus on what is being said. Now, if you are used to being pulled in all these different directions and distracted, sometimes I'll have conversations with people and they're just like looking at their phones all the time. It's a terrible habit. And if you are not in the practice of really focusing on the person in front of you and what they're saying, this can be really, really tough in the beginning, but it is definitely worth practicing. So focus on what is being said. If distractions pop up, and this could be in your brain, so things are popping up in your mind, just very gently push those things away. Turn off your phone, turn off your email, close the door. Do what you need to do to really focus on this person who's in front of you, especially if you're in a negotiation with them. Release any judgments, release any biases that you're bringing into this conversation. If you want to successfully negotiate, you've got to come to that conversation without bringing any of your junk, okay? There's no room for your junk in a really good negotiation, which means you've got to clear all that stuff out ahead of time and really set your focus to coming to that conversation with a clean slate, a clear heart. So you're not bringing any of that junk into it. And really make an effort to put that person who's in front of you, to put them first. The more that you can really listen to what they have to say, appreciate their position, that in itself is going to help you negotiate probably better than anything else. Again, there's no room, right, for your junk in a negotiation. Never try to negotiate when you are emotionally charged. If you're really angry about something, if you're really feeling passionate about something, if you think it's okay to show up in that negotiation and dump all your stuff on the other person, I'm telling you right now, it's not. Because that person is going to react in a way that is not going to be good for your negotiation. They're going to get defensive. They're going to not want to hear it. They're already going to be in this mindset of like pushing back against you. So this is the number one thing I think you can do to really prepare yourself for negotiation. And look, it could be, negotiation could be, I need to, negotiate with my landlord on our new, lease agreement. It could be a sales call that you're taking where you're going to be negotiating your own products or services. It can be in a relationship, a team member who says, hey, I don't want to do these duties anymore. And we've got to negotiate a place of where that works, okay? So before you go into a negotiation, I want you to take steps to release any of your own stuff, okay? And we all have stuff. And if your brain says, oh, I don't have stuff, your brain is not telling you the truth. We all have stuff. So some of the things that you can do to release all of that are meditation. A few minutes, take 5 minutes, sit quietly, listen to some calming music, and just for 5 minutes, just let it all go, relax, release the stress. If being in a negotiation brings up a lot of fear, just let go of that fear. Visualize the outcome that you're after. Deep breathing. Even if we're stressed out, if we can breathe slow and deep and calm, it will literally like trick our bodies into thinking that we're not actually stressed out. And journaling is another one of my favorite tools. If you've ever had to go into a negotiation in business and maybe somebody has made you really, really angry, you might have used this before where like before you have to like talk to them, you'll just sit down and either type or write out all the reasons why you don't like this person or you don't like the negotiation or whatever. That is such a great practice because it gets all that stuff, just put it out there. Type it up, write it down, get it all out there so that you can clean the slate and then go into the real conversation. If you write it down, don't send it, okay? Don't share it with anybody. You can write it and then delete it. If you handwrite it, rip it up, throw it away. It's not to ever be shared, but it's a tool for you to get in the right space before you go into that conversation for whatever it is that you might be negotiating. Now, for some of us, we worry about, well, oh my God, if I don't really prepare about what I'm going to say next, but don't worry about this. You will know, trust yourself, you'll know what to say next because if you're really listening, like really tuned in and you're really listening, then anything that you say next is actually going to matter more because the person is going to tell that you were tuned in and listening and you will naturally know what to say next. People know when you're not listening to them, but they also know when you are, and you can absolutely use this to your advantage. All right, key number 2, discovering. When you're really, really listening, you're going to pick up things. You're going to get key information, and you can use this information to then ask questions. As you ask questions, that's going to help you to truly understand the needs of that person. Remember, if we're putting that person first and we're really tuned in and we're listening to what they want, and then from there we can craft information and craft suggestions and solutions So now we become a negotiator who is focused on a win-win solution for both parties. That's going to make negotiations be so much easier. And when the person knows that you're really listening and tuned into them, they are naturally going to want to help you. So asking questions as you're listening, we want to make sure that you're asking open-ended questions. So these are questions that cannot be answered with a simple yes or no. And many times these questions are going to start with the word what or how. Some examples. So if you, instead of asking the question, can you realistically take that on too? If we change that to an open-ended question, it might be, how would your life change if you took that on too? You see the difference there? Can you really realistically take that on? Yes, no, easy to answer. We want to make it open-ended. How would your life change? And now when you're having that conversation, it makes the other person actually have to think. And now you guys are really engaged in a meaningful conversation. Instead of, could there be any other ways to approach that? How else could you approach that? Or how else could we approach that? That's a much more open-ended question. Do you have any other options? Instead, what other options do you have? It's super easy. Do you have any other options? No. Okay, what other options do you have? Now the person is going to have to think. It's an open-ended question, and maybe there aren't, but at least now you've attempted to ask the questions to get the information that you need for your negotiation. Okay, I love this one. Tell me more. When you're trying to negotiate, right, you go into these conversations and you're often looking for that like holy grail, meaning, what do I need to say to this person to get what I want? If you've ever negotiated, you've probably been guilty of this. I know that I have, right? It's just like, what have I got to say? What have I got to do to get what I want out of this person? Okay. But what happens is when you go into that negotiation, you're trying to like overthink what your next move is going to be. And what happens is the momentum of the conversation gets lost. The person can tell you're not really listening to them. You won't be asking the right questions or be engaged in that conversation because you're so focused on your own agenda. Instead, what you want to do is trust the process of negotiation and communication. And one way to do that is, you mentioned fill in the blank, right? Because if you're really listening, then you're paying attention, you will have something for that blank. So you mentioned blah, blah, blah. Tell me more about that. And then the person, right, will do that. And your job is to be quiet and to listen. When we talk about listening skills and you look at conversations that people have, so often we're just talking, we're talking over each other, we're not really listening to each other. In my first software company, I had to learn how to sell. It was a brand new company. It was my company. I didn't have a sales team. And back then we would do a lot of trade shows in my software industry. And so I'd go to my trade show, I'd be in my little booth, and people would come in and they'd be like, hey, tell me about your software. And I would just launch in because our software had so many great features. We were one of the first systems to ever use a touch screen, right? This is a long time ago. And so I just start, here's all the things that our system does. It's so amazing. And their eyes would glaze over and they would, say something to get out of the booth like, great, I'll call you again later. And off they would, and I wouldn't make any sales, and it was terrible. And so I really had to develop my listening skills. So instead, I had to change my approach. When people came into the booth, the first thing that I would do is, well, tell me, what system are you using now? The system that you're using now, what problems are you having with it? And then it was the hardest thing ever, but I had to be quiet and I had to listen. And if I listened to what they said when I asked these questions, they told me how to sell them if I listened. They would tell me the problems that they were having with their current system. And if all I did was then show them how we solved that problem in our software, the rest took care of itself. Okay, but it all came from, hey, Jennifer, be quiet and listen, because they're going to tell you everything that you need to know for your negotiation. And number 3, engage the heart. This might seem a little bit like an odd one out, but we want to make sure that we're listening with our heart. What's being said that isn't really being said? This is the empathetic part. So when you're asking these open-ended questions, really listen to what's being said. We want to really focus on putting ourselves in the shoes of the other person. And if we can see things from their perspective, that is actually going to make us excellent negotiators. It does require us to check our own ego. Check it right at the door. In this kind of a situation, it is not serving you. We've got to put the needs of the other person first. So if we can truly understand their needs, then we can start to build trust. And then once we have the trust, now we can start to propose solutions that become a win-win for us both. When you've established that trust, the other person is much more likely to give you what you want, okay? But that doesn't happen because we bullied past them or we were super aggressive. It happened because we took the time to listen, to ask questions, to hear with our hearts, to propose solutions that are win-win for us both, to build that trust into the relationship. That's why it happened. We want to make sure that whoever you're negotiating with, that we get on the same page. Because when you're on the same page, compromise becomes so much easier. And guess what? Negotiations actually start to become fun. It does not have to be about conflict and bullying and control. And you'll never learn any of that stuff from me because I don't believe in it. I don't think it's necessary. And you can negotiate anything you need to negotiate and do it in a heartfelt, authentic, loving way. All right, so let's talk about some ways to put this into action, because like anything else, if you want to get good at it, it's going to require some practice. Don't expect to do this once, like, hey, this one time I actually listened and now I'm an expert. No, that's not how it works. Think about like playing the piano. Do you learn to play the piano in one day? No. And so listening skills are very similar to that. It's something that you can always be perfecting. And I'm going to share some exercises with you to get started. Exercise number 1 is to practice on focus. Practice focus on anything that you're listening to. Ideally, if it's a person who is in front of you, you can practice on your kid, your partner, your client, your employee. There are many, many opportunities, but when somebody else is talking, notice how many other things are going through your mind, okay? And then set aside this like, oh, I've got to say or do things so that this person will like me. Forget about that. Let's set that aside. And instead, we're going to focus on building trust. And so this is the exercise. It's very simple, but it can actually be, just because it's simple doesn't mean that it's easy, especially if we are so caught up in all of the daily distractions and trying to multitask and look at our phones and have a conversation at the same time. We're going to let all those things go. We're going to forget about being liked. We're going to focus on trust. And when somebody is in front of you and speaking, focus on that person and really, really listen to them. Another exercise to practice is being honest. Honest. If you feel cornered, if you want to lash out at somebody, instead, what I want you to do is go deep, deep inside yourself and be vulnerable. Now, when we talk about being vulnerable, this does not mean that we start just vomiting information all over the person and telling them our deepest, darkest secrets, okay? So we have to use a little bit of common sense here. I had a long time ago a client, and he was in the financial industry, and he sent out an email to his entire list, and it was talking about his DUI and how he'd gotten a DUI. And I'm like, dude, like, was this really the best way? And he's like, well, I'm just being vulnerable. Well, I get it, but if you want people to trust you with their money, you probably should not have shared a story quite so personal. So just keep that in mind when we talk about being vulnerable to a point, okay? But like if you're in the conversation and you're not understanding, what's being said, or you're not quite following what the person is talking about, like don't pretend that you know what's going on when you don't. If you're not okay, don't pretend that you are. Instead, practice telling people the truth. Tell them you have respect for what you're saying, right? But have the guts to say, I'm scared, I made a mistake, I'm not sure about this. And that's what we're talking about, where it's like, be honest, allow yourself to be vulnerable and say, hey, I'm not really sure about this. So that's the second exercise. Stop arguing. If you're getting into an argument or you feel it coming on, you want to stop and say to the other person, and here's an example. I feel like you're attacking me and you probably feel like I'm attacking you. We're really both just defending ourselves. And we start fresh and solve this problem together, okay? This is going to help that other person to understand that your intention is to solve the problem, not get into an argument. As soon as you guys are arguing, people are getting on their defensive. Now it's like, my way or the highway. You're not going to come to any kind of successful negotiation or resolution. So the minute that you start to see this is headed for an argument, stop it right then and there and really be clear about your intention for the outcome of the conversation. And finally, intention. This is another great exercise to practice. So before you go into a negotiation, get crystal clear on the outcome that you desire. Okay, be open to new ways of being able to accomplish that objective. It can't be, this is what I want, I'm not settling for anything else, my way or the highway. If that's going to put your whoever you're negotiating with on the defensive immediately. Instead, what you want to do is set your intention for a favorable outcome for both of you guys, instead of deciding ahead of time how it's going to go. Now, you can decide ahead of time, I want this to go well, even if it's a difficult conversation, I'm still really committed to a positive outcome. So you can totally be committed to the positive outcome, but bring in that open mindset on different ways or possibilities of getting to that outcome. These are a couple of my favorite resources. So Just Listen is written by Mark Goulston. Mark was a trainer for FBI hostage negotiators, and he wrote a great book all about developing your listening skills. So it's one of my favorites. I wanted to share it with you guys today. And then Eric Maddox is actually a former client of mine, and he was the hostage negotiator who helped to capture Saddam Hussein. And he's got a podcast. It's a few short episodes, but they're really powerful. And he's got a lot of great information to share as far as negotiations. Now, a couple other things I wanted to make sure and bring up in the training for today. The fear of conflict. It's a very, very real thing. So many people do not like conflict. And like I said, those who love it, you may not want to be doing business with. But a simple fix, this has helped me so many times to overcome that fear, is replace the word conflict with communication. Think about it for a second. When we think about, oh, I'm going to go into this situation and there's going to be conflict and it's going to be ugly, of course it's going to bring up fear. But if you replace the word with communication, I'm going to go into this situation and we're going to have a healthy, proactive, productive communication. Well, I'm not really afraid of that. It kind of just gets rid of that fear. So it's a simple thing, but focus on being an excellent communicator. And instead, what's going to happen is it's going to greatly increase your negotiation skills, and you can just kind of toss that whole fear of conflict out the window. There's no real reason to be afraid of that anymore. Replace the word conflict with communication. Another really key point here is to own your value. Before you go into a negotiation, you want to be crystal clear on the value that you bring. And if you don't know what this is, here's a very simple exercise that you can put into practice. So you just sit down, get rid of all your distractions, set a timer for 15 or 20 minutes, and make a list of the value that you bring. What is it? And assign, if you want, assign a dollar value to it as well. What is the value that you bring? And as you make this list and you're like, well, gee, you know, I add this and I add this and I add this. And well, what's the value of that? Put a dollar amount on it. And then before your meeting or your negotiation, just reread that list. So you really go into it super clear on the fact that you have value, you bring value, you know what that value is. And that, in a sense, is going to give you that confidence when you go into the negotiation to really and truly own your value. If you go into the negotiation feeling like you're not worth anything or you don't have anything to offer, it's probably not going to have the outcome that you're after. So very simple exercise, just do it before any negotiation. Also, ask for what you want. Now, if you didn't take the time to get clear on the outcome that you were after, how are you going to really clearly state, well, what do you want out of this negotiation? So this is why it's so important to get clear on the outcome that you want. Go into that negotiation clear on the outcome. If you're not clear, take the time to get clear. And then make sure that you're asking for what you want. This is where fear can pop up too, where it's just like, oh, what are they going to think of me? Will they not like me if I say, you know, this is what I want? But actually, so many people want to be people pleasers, right? And everybody wants to make everybody happy. That when you just start asking for what you want, in many ways, it's such a relief because we don't have to guess. We don't have to wonder, what is it that you really want? If you just clearly tell me, what do you really want? Now we can work on getting there, okay? So don't be afraid to ask for what you really want inside of a negotiation. And hopefully you're also taking into mind that other person and making sure that it's a win-win for both parties. Okay, super quick little recap here. The key to negotiating like a pro is to start learning to listen like a pro. Putting the needs of that other person first, right? Putting them before your own so that you can empathize, put yourself in their shoes, really understand the position. That's going to help you negotiate a successful outcome. Making sure that you're listening so that you can build trust in that relationship and get both of you guys on the same page. And then also setting your intention for a favorable outcome. Again, putting all the practices that I shared with you today to good use because it is the only way to improve. If you take what you learned here today and then you don't actually put it into practice, you're not going to experience any of the benefits of changing these things in your negotiation skills. Replace the word conflict with communication in your vocabulary starting right now today. Know your value, own your value, and if necessary, be willing to walk away. What's that quote? He who walks away wins, right? The person who's willing to walk away generally does have a lot of that power. And so at the end of the day, if you can't come to a successful win-win negotiation, be willing to walk away. Ask for what you truly want, but get clear on what it is that you truly want first. And then finally, give yourself patience and grace as you put these items into practice, because as I said, they're simple concepts to understand, but they're not always easy concepts to practice, okay? Simple does not necessarily mean easy. Okay, so my question back to you, and I would love to hear from you in the Q&A. The Q&A is, how are you going to apply this information to your business and your life? And I'd also love for you to share with me what was your biggest takeaway. And we've got a few in here, so I'm going to go. And if you have questions about the presentation too, feel free to go ahead and put the question into the Q&A, not the chat. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to take a few minutes and we're going to answer some of these questions. So we've got one in there right now. How do I negotiate if I know the person is lying? Ideally, I wouldn't want to work with them, but what if I have to? Well, my first question back there is, why do you have to work with somebody that you know is lying? Is this really the case? Or is it something that we've created? Like, you know, I really need this client, and even though they're not telling me the truth, I really need the money, so I have to work with them. That's not true. You actually don't have to work with them. Now, if it's a work situation and maybe it's a client, you don't have the authority to call them out or to fire them. You don't have that authority, and so you're in a situation where you have to work with somebody who's lying to you. Then I would take what we've learned here today to authentically call them out. Call them out. If you know they're lying, there's no reason why you cannot ask an open-ended question to get them talking, to get that, that lie out there so that you guys can have an honest conversation about it. And this is part of like getting clear on your outcome and being willing to ask for what you want. So that also means that sometimes you might need to be willing to ask them why they are saying, why they are doing things which you know to be untrue. But again, this is going to be like, you've got to do the work on yourself to prepare yourself for this conversation so that you can have the outcome, which is hopefully the person coming clean, you're both on the same page, and now you're both negotiating whatever it is that you need to negotiate. All right, any words of advice when you find yourself in business situations with people at the extreme of not caring for fairness, narcissists, con artists? Just leaving is not an immediate option. One can take without having really tough discussions. Okay, that's where I think we come back to what you said in your question, which is those really tough discussions. Because if you're finding yourself in business situations with these kind of extreme personality types, there's no way out of that without having a tough discussion. Now, a tough discussion doesn't mean it has to have conflict. It doesn't mean people are yelling and screaming or name calling or being immature or any of that kind of stuff. A tough discussion can be an honest discussion. Sometimes when we're just all being vulnerable and honest and putting it all out there, it can be really tough, but it can also be really, really productive. And so I would say, don't shy away from those conversations. But if you've done the work on yourself, you've checked your ego, you're really empathetic listening, because these people, even the narcissists and the con artists and those kinds of people, they still have needs. They're still human beings. They're trying to get those needs met. They're just doing it in some unscrupulous ways. So if you can really empathetic listen with your heart, really try to understand where they're coming from, what they're trying to get, that might actually help you break through and get to them and be able to negotiate a resolution to whatever it is that you guys are talking about in business. So all of these skills definitely apply, but don't shy away from a tough discussion just because it's tough. Shy away from a discussion if people are yelling and screaming and acting crazy. Of course, you can remove yourself from that, but not having open, honest, vulnerable conversations. All right, so this assumes highly engaged, attentive prospect, a need for our own self-improvement. But what if it is a prospect who's disengaged, distracted, driving, checking their phone? How do you deal with that? I'm going to tell you right now, here's how I deal with it. And I've had this happen to me a few times on coaching calls, right? A client is like trying to do 12 other things during a coaching call. And here's the way I handle it. Look, client, I want you to get the most of our time together. There's no way we can do that if you are doing fill in the blank, driving, shopping, running errands, running another meeting, whatever. There's no way that you're going to get your time out of this conversation if you're trying to do both of these things. When can we reschedule at a time when you can be distraction free and we can really focus on, whatever it is that we're working on? That's how I handle it. And the client is either going to say, oh, I really appreciate that. Yes, let's absolutely reschedule. You're also sending that verbal communication that this is not how I run things. Like you're not, if we're going to be in a relationship together, business or personal, you're not going to be able to be distracted when you work with me. Okay. So you're non-verbally actually teaching this client of who you are, your value, how you work, what you'll accept and what you won't accept, but you're doing it in a non-confrontational way. But flat out, if the prospect is doing 12 other things, I would reschedule the call at a time when it's convenient for them to be distraction free. If they don't want to do it, I say goodbye. It's probably not your ideal client if that's how they act. And that's part of that. Be willing to walk away. All right, do you have any suggestions for job negotiation? Da-da-da. Oftentimes an employer will say the budget is X and I want to make sure that will work for you before we continue the conversation. Or you're receiving a final offer and a number is given and you're told this is what the position is budgeted for. How do you respond without losing the offer? You respond with honesty. We talked about this, and sometimes honesty is difficult and sometimes it does require you to walk away. But if an employer is saying, this is our budget, I would believe them if they're hopefully honest and trustworthy. I'm an employer and I can tell you when I hire, I've many times said to a prospect, this is the budget that we have. No disrespect, but this is the budget. And is it going to work for you or not? And as an employer, I'm looking for an honest answer. If it won't work for you, tell me so that we can part friends and we can go find somebody who it will work for. If it will work for you, fantastic. Let's continue the conversation and let's not waste time. So in a situation like this, honesty, be very, very clear on what you're willing to accept, what you're not willing to accept. And finally, be willing to walk away if it is not going to be the right fit for you. This was great. Thank you, Susan. I went into a salary negotiation, used most of what you said intuitively, beautiful. The only thing I would add is the other person is not the enemy. When I realized that, it was much easier. This is fantastic feedback, Susan. Thank you so much for sharing this, because you're right. The other person is not the enemy. If we go into a negotiation thinking that they are, think of how that changes our listening skills. It's going to put us on the defensive. We're not going to present information maybe as effectively as we could. Instead, if we're listening with our heart, if we genuinely want a win-win, even in a job interview, like it can still be a win-win. Like it needs to work for both parties in order for it to work long-term. All right, biggest takeaway when you said, when you listen, people tell you how to sell them. It is so true, but it starts with open-ended questions. You have to genuinely ask a question and then listen for the answer. You listen, they will give you everything that you need in a sales conversation. Now, that doesn't mean that we take the information and we do unruly, negative things with it. But if you have the information and then you have a product or service that genuinely fits, it's the perfect opportunity now to be able to, give them the information that they need in order for you to help them and to serve them in an authentic and genuine way. I will apply knowing and reviewing the value I bring. I love that. Great takeaway before entering any negotiations. Listen more, be calm, do your due diligence. I love that. Great takeaways, you guys. You're welcome, Iris. I'm glad that you're learning so much. If I already entered the first conversation unprepared, so they didn't hear back, is there any way to reopen it and get another opportunity? Maybe offer them something specific that they want. Great, great question. And so if you went into that conversation and you were not prepared, you have to be prepared for that person not wanting to open back up to you. It doesn't mean that you can't reach out to them. It doesn't mean that you can't be a little vulnerable and say, hey, we had this conversation. Here's what was happening in my life. I am so sorry. I wasn't really tuned in. I would love an opportunity to make this right or have another conversation with you. And then it's up to them if they want to say yes or they want to say no. But remember, in those first opportunities, that's our chance to really establish the trust. So if we kind of blow it, great lesson learned, make sure you don't do it again. But if you do want to go back to that person and authentically, vulnerably say, here's where I was, I'm really very sorry. I'd love another chance. And if they give it to you, fantastic. And if they don't, learning lesson, don't do that again. Okay. This is excellent. Wonderful, Patricia. I will be on the other end of negotiation for a publishing contract. I didn't think of as a debut author. I really had any room to ask for anything at all, but making the list of your values really resonates. That's awesome. I'm so glad that was your biggest takeaway. All right, you guys, thank you so much for being here. I'm sorry I couldn't get to all of them, but I love all your takeaways. I'm actually going to turn this back over to Rose for some final closing comments. And again, thank you so much for the great questions and the great takeaways, and just take this stuff and apply it. You can do it. Really quickly, sorry, I forgot to share. If you have any final questions, you can always reach me at my email. This is my direct email, It's Jennifer Dawn Coaching. You can also visit my website, jenniferdawncoaching.com. Again, this will be in the recording, so you'll have it. Jennifer at Jennifer Dawn Coaching. All right, Rose, it's all yours.
Okay. So on this screen, we have the names of the chapters that were sponsoring this and their contact information. This will be in the package that you get with the slides and the recording. So you will have this. Any questions about business and starting a business or growing a business, contact your SCORE chapter. They're willing to help. Next slide. So before I talk about next month, I do want to mention that Jennifer has done a webinar called One Page Business Plan. It's up on score.org. Look for it. It's excellent. I've given it to a lot of people. They love it. Next month, we're going to have grants, myths and truths. We have an expert on grants. She's also a grant writer, and she's going to talk about grants for businesses and nonprofits and really ferret out what's really true and what we think is true about those. That'll be April 13th at 9 a.m. So it's going to be in the morning. Look for us. And just at the end, we are sponsored by the Small Business Administration, a federal organization. So thank you all, and I hope you go out and you negotiate and have some really good success. And do know that if you have more questions for Jennifer, you can always reach out to Jennifer at jennifercoaching.com.
Absolutely. Rose, really, I see we have like 2 minutes left. There was one question about how do you negotiate your products and services if you know the people you're working with don't have the money? And I think that's such a great question. I know one that we always come up with. So I'm going to pop this in at the very end. So here's the thing. People find the money for what they want. If the value is there, they will find the money. It doesn't mean that you cannot, at your discretion, discount a product or a service as necessary, but it does not mean that you have to give it away for free. And I would not give it away for free because people value what they pay for. And think about it right now, like if somebody wants something, and even in your own life, if you really want something, you find the money. When the value is there and you want it, you will find the money. Your clients are no different. So even if you discount a little bit, that's fine. But do not give it away for free because they're not going to value it the way that they would value something that they've actually got skin in the game for. Sorry, saw that question. I was like, that's a great one. I wanted to just pop that in our last minute.
Yeah, and I really agree with that, Jennifer, because I've had that experience with a client and I didn't charge them enough and they didn't do the work. Yep. And it just doesn't work. So, and I've had other clients who have done the work because it meant something to them and they had something at stake. So you want clients that have something at stake when you enroll them.
Absolutely. I mean, part of my brand with all the business owners I work with is serve without the sacrifice, meaning serve, do your work, be in your business, but you can't do it without sacrificing. You don't do it without sacrificing your life, your soul, your sanity, your value, because then the only thing that's going to happen is you're going to be resentful and angry. It will not be a win-win for both parties. So serve without the sacrifice.
Okay.
All right. That's it, you guys. Thank you so much for being here with us today. We really appreciate it. And a recording will be sent out within the next couple of days with everything that we discussed here.
Okay.